You should record to the cloud so that you don't have to,
Okay.
take
So
your.
pause to stop recording. So I'll pause right now.
Oh, so see.
All right. We are now recording the Financial Planning Allocation Commission regular meeting of September 16th, starting at 7 p.m. The chairman, Ernie Sharp, has asked me to read the rules of conduct for a virtual meeting. This is a web-based call. We are opening under the following procedures. This session is being both video and audio recorded. Commissioners and staff will generally remain on mute except when speaking or voting, and will generally be keeping their videos on themselves throughout the meeting. If a member of the public creates an audio or video disruption, they may be manually ejected from the meeting through the recommendations of staff or the chair. For public input before the meeting, please email your comments to publicinput@columbiact.org within 24 hours before the meeting. For public input during the meeting, your comments can be submitted through the chat feature in Zoom, or wave your hand and request that your mic be unmuted. Please include both methods. With both methods, please give your name and your address. That's all.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We have audience of citizens next on the agenda. Did we get anything in advance?
No, nothing came in through public input in advance, and at the moment, the chat room is empty and nobody's waiting.
Okay, I'll check again at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Approval of minutes. Jen caught herself in the heading, and it's easy to do. Refers to our last meeting as a public hearing, and that will be corrected as part of the motion to approve. Anybody else have any problem with the minutes?
No.
In that case, I move to approve the minutes with the minor correction in the heading.
I second.
Hi, Judy.
Okay, we have a second. Is there any discussion? Then we'll go through. Vote. Brian.
Approve.
Dick.
Aye.
Jeff.
Approve.
Judy.
Approve.
Kelly.
Yes.
I vote yes. Correspondence. Anything in the correspondence catch anybody's eye? No?
No.
No.
This will be quick. The only real item we have for consideration tonight is the non-lapsing account. Our request for money to be deposited there. Since we shouldn't make that sort of decision in a vacuum, I asked Bev to refresh us a little bit in terms of helping us remember what our financial position is before we make that decision. So we'll jump to new business, preliminary numbers for closing out last year. Bev?
Okay, so I'll start with the revenue figures. I still have some adjustments to make, but currently we're showing a surplus of over $420,000 in revenue, which is pretty good considering the COVID outbreak came on. The property tax came to a positive of over $383,000. The ECS grant, we got an extra $100,000, which was not anticipated. Even the interest before the market crashed, we have extra money. We don't expect that this year. We have about almost $12,000 in additional interest above budget. Even with the special ed coming in short because of the changes of $59,000 and having to refund 3 months of preschool tuition, overall the town did very well last year in revenues. As for the town of Columbia operating budget, I have almost everything posted right now. The Board of Selectmen budget is showing about approximately a $291,000 surplus. It's just a variety of lines between salary lines, items that purchased with the COVID going on, This surplus does include adjustments of about over $5,000 that we're waiting for FEMA and OPM to reimburse us for our COVID expenses. But pretty much every department has given back money in one way, shape, or form. So overall, we're doing well. The capital projects getting done. There was over $1 million, $1.6 million carried forward to next year. This also includes the additional funds that were given to the fire department for the rescue truck. We're doing on that. And then, hope I'm not going too fast. Just stop me if you have questions. And as for the school, they currently have over, here's the number, $643,000 available funds. That includes getting a little under $70,000 back for COVID expenses last spring from the CARES Act with the Department of Ed and FEMA, and estimated FEMA and OPM reimbursements. And pretty much everything has been posted that needs to be posted to the Board of Ed, unless another bill comes in the next couple of weeks. And even the grants, they brought in, the school grants, they brought in a little over $200,000. The money's been spent and taken care of, and whatever was budgeted this year. So overall, despite what happened, the town and the school have done very well this year. Any questions?
I do. Bev, did the fire department purchase the truck?
No, they're, I think, in the process of putting together the specs, I believe, right, Mark? And I think they'll be going out to bid sometime this year once they get the specs all together. So they just needed money up front in case they need to do a deposit and all that. So
We want
That's
enough
right.
money for them to go forward, and then once they bid it out, we'll complete the funding for the truck.
Okay.
Any other questions? My big question, Bev, is do you have an estimate of the end of last year's fund balance?
not quite yet. Preliminary numbers, I think we're going to be about the same, if not higher than last year. So I think we're around a 3.6 or 3.7. We could be as high as 3.8 with all this money being put back. So I'll have that for you in the next meeting.
Okay, you got a pencil?
Yes, or a pen. Does that work?
Nope.
Well, shut down and go find one.
I just confused myself. I just wrote the numbers down. What did I do with them? Okay, revenues, 420K variance.
Yes.
We did the budget. What do we have in for a variance? Do you remember? Was that 165 or was it 200,000 for?
Hold on, I happen to bring the budget document with me.
Actually, I did.
I think the variance was like $199,000. So we're to the positive of at least 300.
About 300.
Yes.
Okay, so that would make the fund balance be not quite 300, but 250,000 higher than what we were anticipating, just because of the revenue variance.
Yes.
Okay, Board of Selectmen budget, I think in the budget, Board of Selectmen expenses in the budget document, we thought, yeah, they were going to be 200,000 under. You see, they're now 291 under, so that's another 90,000 better off than we thought we were going to be at budget time.
Yes.
Board of Ed,
And the Board of Ed.
we
Where's that?
had 200,000 expected surplus or underspending in the budget, and they actually came in at 643.
Yes.
So that's another 440,000.
400, we'll say 435.
Okay, what did I get? Just give you 3 or 4 numbers. Do you have a sum, or can you add those? I know I can't.
Like $775,000.
How much?
775.
Okay, so that would say, again, this is rough, when we did the budget, we thought we were gonna have 3,722,000 before using any of the fund balance. So that
Yeah.
means that if we were doing the budget right this second based on that information, we think we'd be starting with 3,722 plus whatever number you got, plus 775.
Yeah, you're going to be about $4.5 million.
Okay.
Very high.
Let's go on vacation.
Okay, again, I just want us to get a feel for roughly where we stand, and 4.5 million. Again, that's not going to be perfect. And when we did the budget, we thought we were going to use 450,000, 452,000.
Yeah.
Nope, just
Oh, yes.
441,000. So we got-
Oh,
Don.
So if we actually use 400,
what?
almost 500,000, then that would say we would expect our fund balance to be around 4 million
yes,
at the end of this year. We
Yeah.
start the year with 4.5, we're gonna use about 500,000. So at the end of this year, we'd expect to be around 4.
I think so. Yes. Rough estimate.
Everybody with me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to beat the numbers to death, but just to get a feel for where we are so that we can put things in perspective when we begin the discussions. As we've been requested, what, 125,000 into the non-lapsing account?
Yes.
So unless somebody has any more questions or need clarification of anything as to where we'll likely be at the end of last year, let's move right into non-lapsing account discussion. Anybody have any thoughts? The request again is for $125,000. If we did that, we'd be 4 million minus 125,000. We'd still be at 3,800,000.
Ernie, I do have
Yeah.
some questions about the non-lapse. And I just want to refresh myself about exactly what the non-lapsing account is. Now, my recollection is if we have excess money from the Board of Education budget, then that wasn't spent, we can put it into the non-lapsing account. In addition to that, if we expend that money because of an emergency, say in this current fiscal year, then that doesn't count towards the minimum budget requirement. Is that all accurate?
Yes.
That's correct.
So it's probably a good thing to have a substantial amount of money in the non-lapsing account in case, and particularly in these uncertain times, in case some expenditures come up. Is that accurate? Or what do you think?
No.
Is that you,
I see
Kelly?
Kelly
Go.
shaking her head.
Go,
But
Kelly.
I mean, I'm not taking a position either way, by the way. I just want to have a good understanding of the amount of money that we should have in the non-lapsing account, the purposes that it could be used for, and how it impacts the minimum budget requirement and impacts our budget. So could you explain, or maybe Kelly can explain that a little bit.
Well, let's hear what's in Kelly's mind, and then we'll.
Kelly's making also nonverbal stuff.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt, which I would do. I would just glare at you if we were in person. But I think the only difference to what you said, Dick, because you're right, it doesn't impact the MBR, and I like that. But what I'm concerned about is that it is extremely limited in the purposes. And every time we have suggested to the Board of Education that they could use the money in this fund, we've always gotten the same refrain, which is they could only use it for something that was completely unexpected. Like a special education child moves into town and they have a substantial expense for that child that they have to incur that year that wasn't budgeted. So I don't think that just having I don't want to use the word slush fund, but having this pool of money available to be used as needed if something comes up doesn't really work unless it's really something like special ed. That's the only thing that they've ever said that can be used for. So I'm afraid that if we've already got 210 in there, we have never used a nickel of it in all the years that we've been doing it. And every time we've suggested it, they've said it can't be used for something anticipated. So I don't know that it's really a good idea to build that up any further, because I don't know that we'll ever use it. I mean,
Good.
the
I have a
odds of our using $210,000 for a special ed needs in a given year, or, you know, I don't know, maybe the roof collapses or something and we need it for that, but, you know, for the, you know, insurance adjustment. But I don't see it being useful except in those very extraordinary circumstances. So I don't want to build up that account too much and just have it sit there for decades and not being used.
Is the superintendent of schools part of this meeting? Can you give a reaction to that?
Ernie,
Yes,
do you want Maria to speak or me to speak or both of us to speak?
if Maria is available, I'd love to hear from her.
Go ahead, Maria.
I'm happy to speak to it a little bit. And I know Chris just hopped into as a board chair. So it's for unanticipated expenses. I think what I've said in the past, I don't know the history of how the fund has been used or been requested to be used in the past. The thing that is important, that one placement for a student could be approximately $300,000. So it's not an excess amount of money to have in an account for, you know, approximately $300,000. It would just cover, you know, a placement. This year, because of COVID, we have a lot of unanticipated potential costs. If we have to open up fully and adhere to the social distancing requirements, we probably would have to hire another 3 to 4 teachers, which right now our expenses, I think we're around $75,000 over our anticipated budget and staffing right at this moment. The only other unanticipated effect potentially for this year, which we have to look at our numbers first before I can really give you an exact number, but we had an additional 16 students move into the elementary school and an additional 16 students move into the high school level, which is 16 unanticipated students attending E.O. Smith, which is about 13,000 and change per student, which is about 220,000. So I don't know how that will play out. You know, in the next month or so, we'll reconcile the numbers of high school students. And in terms of COVID cost, we won't know, you know, until later in the year. So in other districts I've worked, it's very reasonable to have $250,000, $300,000 in an account for just special education needs. So I'm happy to answer anything else, but that's just kind of my response. And I do think it's probably fairly safe to have an amount so that you don't have to go back to the town and have them reallocate funds, which then does impact MBR. In this case, it's just kind of a, you know, you take care of the unanticipated need.
Okay, so if, I mean, the minimum budget requirement requires us to not reduce expenditures on the school budget from this current fiscal year that we expend into what we budget for next year. So, and like,
Well, we don't know that.
Go
In
ahead,
theory, yes, but the formula we truly do not understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so they give you some exceptions and which nobody understands. This year we could have reduced the budget, but I couldn't have calculated the amount if you paid me. But go ahead, Dick.
no, I'm just, and again, I'm not taking a position on anything. I just want to understand the process. If we end up having to take, say, $300,000 out of our general fund to fund additional school expenditures, that would mean that next year we would have to use that as a base for our budget unless we take it from the non-lapsing account. If we take it from the non-lapsing account, that means that it doesn't apply to the MBR. So
That's not actually true, Dick, because we wouldn't need 300. That would take 540,000. Expenditures is already what, 240? I mean, what,
210.
210?
15 in there now.
So
215.
215. So if there's a $300,000 expenditure for somebody, coming back to the town would really be 85. That's what would impact MBR, not what they
If-
take out of the balance.
Lapsing,
Correct?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever comes out of the general fund would impact the MBR.
So,
Historically, do we have any historical figures or anything on how often and what amounts we've taken from the non-lapsing in our history?
There's never been a withdrawal from the non-lapsing account. It was established back in 2015. There was $100,000 put in there. It was around the time when the special ed costs were increasing every single year, including that year, I believe we went back to the town for $400,000, which we ended up, there was changes. We didn't need the whole thing. The year after, we put in 40,000. Last year was 75,000. And so each year we put a little bit in just to build it up, but there's been, fortunately, the special ed costs have each year been decreasing. Anything that needed to be fixed in the school, the Board of Ed has been able to cover within the budget without going back to the town and using the non-lapsing account. So they've been very fortunate. This year there is, again, like Maria said, there's some additional high school students that were not anticipated, as well as the COVID expenses. I will say that on a few meetings I have attended, the FEMA reimbursement, possibly the OPM reimbursement, and the Department Ed, the funding is only until December 31. And then there's no, and some of that funding may be even less than what we currently have received. So so they may need the non-lapsing account to cover some of their expenses for that too. So,
But is that allowed? Kelly had made mention that there's very strict allowances. You know, what does fall under an acceptable usage of the funds?
it's unanticipated and unbudgeted items that come to the Board of Ed. So it can't be special ed. That was one of the items that were stressed, but if something is needed for the school, say they have to get additional staffing, it wasn't anticipated, or say they needed to fix the boiler, and they don't have the funding within budget. Even a capital item that comes up saying, say that we had owned a bus and we need to buy a new bus, they could use that, but we don't own the buses, thank goodness. And so
Okay.
for anything unanticipated, so it wasn't close mine, but I know special ed and capital were listed in the original resolution, but it's really, it can go beyond that. It's just an interpretation and what FiPAC will approve.
And so, Maria, your opinion and your experience in this is 250 to 300 is a comfortable zone?
Yeah, I mean, I would think, 300 it's very reasonable. It's not an excessive amount in a fund, as I said, because one student can cost that amount. And then this year is just such an unusual year with COVID that, many schools are very concerned that they may be going millions of dollars over their budget. I don't think that will be our case, but I do think there will be costs that we may have to come back to either the town or use the non-lapsing. Personally, I'd rather use the non-lapsing than to have to come back in front of you all and ask for additional, funding.
So
Maria
you're
has the-
requesting so 125 is being requested. Do we have the ability, Ernie, to make it 85?
Yeah,
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, I'm done with my questions. Thank you, Maria.
You're welcome.
I was going to ask Maria, has the Board of Ed had that discussion? For instance, was that part of the 125, that let's ask for 125 so we can make sure we cover COVID costs? And if we have such COVID costs, we will ask for it to come out of non-lapsing, making that sort of commitment. Go ahead.
Well, Chris is on the call, is on the meeting as well, so I could speak to, I did speak with the board about the additional COVID expenses that, we really can't predict at this point. We also talked about the additional students at the secondary level. Chris, do you want to speak to the board's conversation?
You're
Is that
welcome
okay,
to speak.
Ernie?
Yeah, he's welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Lent, 12 Randazzo Road. So the extent of the conversation we had was at a very high level, and it's been the past couple board meetings regarding COVID-related expenses. Last night, the board had a meeting, and the main focus of the non-lapsing account was to come up with what the board felt comfortable in requesting from FiPAC. And quite honestly, you know, the conversation started at up to 2% because that's what the MOU was recently updated for. So we could have come to you this evening and asked for around $254,000. The board did not feel comfortable with that, and through pretty long dialogue decided, you know, maybe up to 1% this year, given the nature, given everything, would be a reasonable request. They didn't feel comfortable asking for the full 2%. But as far as what that could be used for related to COVID-19, I mean, aside from the understanding that, you know, we would need to exercise prudence and do what we could within the existing budget and make adjustments before we even came to you and requested money, whether if it's from the non-lapsing or to call a town meeting. So that's really the approach, like Maria said, that the board would exercise. It would be something that we would only come to at a last resort.
Yeah, I know it's tough for a chairman to speak without votes, and I'm not asking you, but is it your general feel that your priority would be if there were money constraints that it would be within budget, then non-lapsing, then the town, or you can choose not to answer that if you're not comfortable?
I mean, I'm comfortable with that. Would be the consensus, in my opinion. The way that the board would look at it. I mean, we'd look at the budget within the existing budget first, and then non-lapsing account certainly secondary. So I'm pretty comfortable saying that I think at least the majority of the board would go that direction.
Okay, is First Selectman Everett with us tonight?
No.
Then Mark, I don't know if you have any gut feelings. I guess one of the things that COVID is doing to us is bankrupting the state. Not quite, but do you have any feel for what's going on at the state capitol and how that might impact the money that's available to towns? Mark?
No, our biggest concern is knee-jerk reaction at the political level of rewriting procedures for police departments, the liability that might create through KERMA, our insurance agency, which is huge right now. Another big concern is the goal to create better diversity, equal housing opportunities statewide. I'm afraid that our legislators don't really understand what limits dense housing out in the rural areas, which is septic, community water, sewer systems, mass transit. None of those, you know, the sewers and the mass transit don't exist out here, but there is pending legislation that could force us to change our zoning regulations. So a lot of that is all happening right now without much understanding of what the unintended consequences could be to rural towns such as us. So we're
But you don't
keeping
see
a close
the
watch on that.
state budget deficit harming the towns?
With the budget deficit for Columbia right now, where we have over 2,000 people who have not paid their taxes that are due October 1st, 2,200. So we're hoping that'll all start coming in at the end of this month. We're going to start a campaign to remind people not to forget to pay their, which is mostly automobile tax, before the October 1st deadline hits. So we're going to be doing that through Facebook, email blasts, and on our website to try to get those revenues in.
Say that again. Most of that is automobile. Is that what you said?
Correct.
So the majority of the taxes, or the taxes on homes.
Automobile and real estate that was not escrowed.
Oh,
So
okay.
anyone who was not escrowed had the opportunity to pay late.
That's a little scary. So there might be people who were escrowed who won't be able to make it.
Well, if they're escrowed, it automatically paid July 1st. They didn't get a bump to October.
No, I'm thinking about January or whatever.
I can't respond to
I know
January.
you can't answer that. I'm just thinking. So the
Right.
problem might be bigger than what we're seeing. Somebody
Could be.
lost their
We're,
job.
we're
and-
hoping most of the taxes all come in the next 2 weeks.
Oh, I hope so too. I hope everybody's back to work and happy and whatever.
Yeah, we'll have to watch out for the state funding like ECS grant. That could decrease because if more kids are at home, the state could say, well, there's less students, less money coming to you. And even the grants, so far, we're fortunate that the grants that the Board of Ed gets hasn't really been impacted. So, and Marie and I did have a talk with the State Department of Ed and talked to Kathy Dempsey, and she's correcting the latest allocation to us and added another, I think it was $71,000.
Yeah, which is great.
$71,000 back to the Board of Ed. So they're going to get in total about $80,000 to cover COVID expenses right now. But after December, that funding is probably going to disappear. So.
Okay. Nobody asked, but in terms of the fund, the non-lapsing account, what's the appropriate level? I think I've expressed it in the past that we ought to think about it, and I would be comfortable with a higher number. I said that, and I stand by that to cover things like special ed kids who come in 1 year and they tend not to stay for 4 or 5 or 6 years. So we get a spike, which pushes up our MBR, then they leave, and then we're stuck budgeting a number we don't believe in. And even when superintendents wanted to reduce their budget, they couldn't. So the big question now is there anything in that COVID has caused that will put undue pressure on us and cause us to have to increase taxes over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years? I know we can't predict that for in the future. So the question is, I think it's safer and we have more flexibility if we put all surplus into the undesignated fund. That way, if there's a problem with the school, their only choice would be to come to the Board of Selectmen for money. And I'm sure the Board of Selectmen will support that. But if that happens, then there's the continued increase or continuation of the pattern of the MBR going up. While I think maybe I'd like to see the non-lapsing account a little bigger, I share some of the concerns that people have expressed. We shouldn't be putting money there if it's going to be there indefinitely. So I think that's why we're stressing a little bit. And I encourage the Board of Education to continue the discussions about the priorities and circumstances that would say, well, if there's pressure on the budget, what's our priority or what steps we'll take? First, we'll try to eat it. Second, we'll go to non-lapsing. Third alternative would be to go to the general fund under certain circumstances. And I'm not going to try to define those circumstances, but I hope the Board of Education would have that discussion. Now the question is, FiPAC's primary concern is on the larger scale. And the question would be that we can't answer is, how much of a safety margin do we need, or do we think we need to get us through the next year or two so we're no worse off than we thought we're going to be at budget time? We just went through the numbers and how much better off in terms of fund balance are we? Bev, I forgot already. 400,000?
Yeah, we're going to
4.5.
So we're going to probably put out a $4 million fund balance. So, which is, where's my budget?
Around 20%, isn't it?
It's going to be probably back to at least over 20% of a fund balance. So it's very healthy.
Yes.
Just so you know that
Okay.
2,200 people equals $1.2 million. We're still waiting.
Say that again.
Mark, is there an estimated recovery, or is it we just fly in dark because of COVID?
We don't know because of COVID, but it's 1.2 million we're waiting for due October 1st.
And I think Carol usually gets a big group coming in at the end of the month. She's already started advertising, so she feels it, a lot of it should come in, so we'll just keep our fingers crossed.
Wait,
And is
can
there,
we back up a second?
Sure.
Let's get a good definition. When are taxes due?
October 1st. Well, the
Is there a
second you're
grace
late.
period? Huh?
October
Okay.
2nd, you're late.
Gotcha. You anticipated my question.
so there's no
So-
grace period?
The grace period was 3 months.
No, I mean, I just typically, I know that, but usually the due date, and then you have 30 days after the due date to pay it.
So that's,
I mean,
October 1st is the drop down dead past the grace period, but if you do not pay by October 1st, the interest and penalties revert back all the way to July 1.
oh, okay.
That's the incentive to try to get people to pay as much as they can by October 1st, because otherwise they're going to have 3 months of interest versus 1.
Right. Right. Okay, that's good for people to know. And I
that's what
think
we're gonna get
people
out.
aren't anticipating, they're forgetting that they didn't, everyone thinks they, oh, I paid that in July, I don't have to do it now. But I think the reminder is helpful to people. Because they
The other-
honestly might legitimately have forgotten that they didn't pay it.
The other thing that happens if you don't pay your car taxes, then it becomes impossible to register a new car until you pay them.
So eventually we'll get the money. Just may not be on time.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, we have to make a decision today about how much to put in the fund, in the non-lapsing account. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I got the sense that people are thinking that we should go up to $300,000, but not more than that. And I think that if we put 85,000 into the non-lapsing account, that would bring us to 3,000,
300.
300,000.
It'll go to 340,000 if they get the 125.
Say that again. How much is in the non-action account right now?
$215,000.
Okay. That's where the 85 came from.
Okay, I move that we put
Hold on,
85,000.
Dick, let's go around the table before you do your motion. You're comfortable, what do you want to do? What's your thought without expressing it as a motion?
My thought is that we should increase the non-lapsing account to $300,000, so we should put $85,000 in.
Brian, you threw that number out first. Is that something you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I'm comfortable. I'm going on the recommendation. So that 300 is a minimum need. So yes, I'm for it.
Oh, okay, Kelly, go ahead.
No, I'm okay with the 85, and that was actually the number I was thinking was to bring it up to 300. But I just want to be on the record saying that if the Board of Education wants to spend $300,000 for COVID-related expenses, that probably is something that should be voted on by the town, because that's an extraordinary amount of money. And I understand it's extraordinary times, but I think the townspeople should vote on it. So I'm not saying that we should, but if that ever comes up, we have a vote on how the non-lapsing fund is spent. So the Board of Education will propose it, but I believe the rule is that FiPAC has to agree
Yes.
on the expenditure. So it's not like it's going to be spent without our knowledge. So
Correct.
I'm okay with the 85, and that was actually the number I was thinking of too.
Jeff, your thoughts?
It all works for me. 85's fine.
Judy?
85 is fine. I would go higher if they thought, I mean, I sort of respect the fact that they've discussed it and come up with 125 as a need, but I'm certainly satisfied to stay with the rest of the group on 85.
My thoughts are I'd like to go a little higher, but some of the things I'm hearing tonight scare the crap out of me. So if our consensus is 85, maybe that's a happy medium. Dick, would you like to make a motion?
I move that we put $85,000 into the non-lapsing account.
Is there a second?
I
I
second.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's vote. Brian,
Yes.
Dick,
Aye.
Jeff,
Yes.
Judy,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
goes to Michael. Never mind. I vote yes. Okay, Chris and Maria, I think it's a happy medium for us. I hope you appreciate that we have to be comfortable or look out for the needs of the town in general. And there's some scary stuff going on. I think you might have had a different outcome if the world were different, but it's not. So 85 is approved. Okay,
Thank you.
anybody else have any comments or anything on your mind? No? Okay, then, Mark, I'll check again for audience of citizens. Any input coming in?
No, sir.
Okay, next meeting is October 21st. Believe it or not, it's time to start thinking about the budget again.
How is that?
I'm sure Mark may have been, or at least begun the process of thinking about how he's gonna setting up a schedule for interviewing the different departments or different, like the rec council, the different departments. And Mark, if you could make an attempt to share that with us, then I think there are some people. I think Brian was interested last year in sitting in on quite a few meetings, and some of us might like to sit in on some of those. So if you could sort of let us know what's going on, I'd appreciate it.
Happy to.
Okay, anybody else? In that case, I'll be dictator and declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Okay, everybody be
Thanks,
safe.
Tim.
You guys
Good
too.
Good
Have a
night.
nice fall. See you next month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
happy Thanksgiving.
Night, everyone.
Happy holiday.
Good night.
Oh, that's next month. I'm so confused.
Happy
Been indoors too long.
fall.
Ernie, but she's got
Bye.